Cheers is filmed before a live studio audience.
Hey, Gary Hart. Gary Hart, there he is.
Oh, hey, Senator.
Hi, Sam. You left your coat in my car last night.
Oh, well, that's sweet of you to bring it by. Thank you.
That was the least I could do for a Trivial Pursuit partner. By the way, thanks for your help with those sports questions.
Oh, well, that's my strong point. Thank you for helping me with everything else.
That's my strong point.
Yeah.
Sam, I better run.
Yeah,
Thanks. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for dropping by.
Oh, my God, it's Gary Hart. Did you see Gary Hart? I saw Gary Hart. Senator Gary Hart. Could have been President Gary Hart. Could still be President Gary Hart. It was Gary Hart. It was Gary Hart. I was just showing you how silly it looks.
Gary Hart was going to become president. Instead, he changed American politics forever. The Frontrunner, directed by Jason Reitman and released in 2018, is a political drama that explores the scandalous, precipitous downfall of a Democratic presidential candidate during the 1988 election. Based on the book All the Truth Is Out, The Week Politics Went Tabloid by Matt Bai, published only 4 years prior to the making of the movie, this fall from grace story of former Colorado Senator Gary Hart, who is played by Hugh Jackman, about the clear frontrunner for the Democratic nomination, is one that highlights a major turning point in political sensationalism. Gary Hart was a serious contender for the nomination and possibly had a chance to win the general election according to many polls, until he dropped out of the race only 1 week after the story from the Miami Herald broke about an affair with Donna Rice, a 29-year-old model and aide in his campaign. Though Hart attempted to re-enter the race later that year, the damage had been done and his political career never recovered.
I intend to seek the presidency of the United States in 1988. And I do so for one single reason, and that is I love my country. And we've seen high standards for public officials and public ethics be eroded.
It's easy to gloss over this part of our political history, but Senator Gary Hart, who's likely someone you've never heard of before, did have a real shot at becoming president. Politically, the 1988 election was a different era of politics, one that existed before the internet and social media, so being tapped in about candidates wasn't as easy then as it is today. In 1987, Ronald Reagan was completing his second term in office, so the presidency was, in theory, a toss-up for both parties. Though the Republicans were starting in a new election cycle strong after Reagan's historic sweep in 1984, they were still unsure if Vice President George H.W. Bush could win, considering that historical precedent was not exactly on his side. The last vice president to successfully win the election after their incumbent president was Martin Van Buren in 1836. Bob Dole and Pat Robertson both ran against him, but lost handily in the primaries. Fun fact, at the time, Donald Trump was also considering running. Now on the Democrats' side, even as early as 1986, Gary Hart was the candidate that made a strong showing on the national polls. His only true opposition, the popular New York Governor Mario Cuomo, father of future Governor Andrew Cuomo and CNN anchor Chris Cuomo, declined outright to run. This opened the floodgates for other Democrats, eager to see the executive branch flip, to jump into the field, including current President Joe Biden and not yet Vice President Al Gore, and well-known activist Reverend Jesse Jackson. Yet, Gary Hart remained at the top, partially because he had previously gained a decent amount of support in the 1984 Democratic Party primaries, right up until this moment.
When I hear your new ideas, I'm reminded of that ad. Where's the beef?
Yeah. If you'd...
Let's keep going to the
No.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. He's going to tell you where the beef is or the roll or something.
If you'd, Fritz, if you'd listen just a minute, I think you'd hear. No, you haven't. That you cannot make this economy grow again. And that's, again, a major difference, I think, between myself and Walter Mondale.
Wait a minute. I told you what I was going to do, get those deficits down, educate the next generation. Those aren't special interest groups. I said I'm going to stand up for against special interests and I'm going to support Social Security and Medicare. What's wrong with that?
Nothing wrong.
Isn't that
with
right?
that.
No, well,
Hart went on to win 26 states, gathering about 36% of the total vote, but Walter Mondale still slid through the nomination with 4 million more votes. Regardless, Gary Hart regained the good graces of the Democratic Party after Mondale was delivered one of the worst landslide defeats in American history. Feeling somewhat vindicated, he entered the race with strong name recognition and by 1987 was gaining traction as a centrist, moderate Democrat, someone that could bridge gaps and beat a Reaganite Republican like George H.W. Bush. In stark contrast to liberal doves like Michael Dukakis, he had made himself a recognized expert on military and defense policy, a trait many thought made him a strong contender against the war hawks of the GOP. It seemed all but inevitable that he would become the Democrats' nominee and one that could possibly go on to become president. So, how did it all go wrong?
I've never known a guy more talented at untangling the bullshit of politics so that anyone can understand. It is a gift, and he wants to share that with people. And all anybody wants is for him to take a stupid photo. He will never understand that.
It starts by showcasing Gary Hart's popularity and how strong his candidacy looked. It's sure to be a contentious campaign, and Hart is an unconventional yet headstrong candidate from the jump. Alongside his momentum is an increasing interest among the press in his unconventional marriage.
Bob, you and he were roommates for a while?
Yeah, when Lee kicked him out a few years ago, he crashed on my couch.
And
anything that happens on my sectional sofa is irrelevant.
Mr. Parker, is this so?
Just some stories circulating.
When I was on trail, we fucked each other. We didn't write about it.
should we follow up?
You know how many members of Congress? We'd have to expel half the Senate.
And you wouldn't be thrilled with who was left.
And a growing sense of unease about it from his staff.
That's what they do.
And they want Gary and Lee, right?
That's right. They call me every single day. They're not the only ones either. I need to know what the plan is. As in, to put them both out there.
Okay, what are you talking about?
The state of things. There's a ton of interest in the separations, in the getting back together. It wouldn't hurt us to... What? I think that people want to get to know the Harts. I think that they want to see them out, walking their dog, pumping their gas, being regular people.
He's not a regular person. He's the next fucking president of the United fucking States.
Then we see he takes a break from the stresses of the campaign on the yacht, called Monkey Business. While the boat was docked in Bimini, one of the women took a picture of Hart sitting on the pier with Donna Rice on his lap. A month after this trip, in early May, the man who had originally invited Hart onto the boat brought the same two women to Washington. The Miami Herald had received a tip about the upcoming visit and was staking out the front of Hart's townhouse in D.C. A Herald reporter saw Rice and Hart go into the house through the front door and assumed, when he didn't see her again, that she spent the night. Several weeks later, the photo of Hart and Rice together in Bimini showed up on the cover of the National Enquirer. There's some evidence to suggest that this may have been a setup against Gary Hart devised by notorious GOP campaign manager Lee Atwater, who divulged in the year before his death that he had had a hand in it. Whether that's true is up for debate, and doesn't really change the content of this movie or this review, but I still feel it's worth mentioning. In the last shot on the yacht, we simply see a wide shot of the yacht. We don't know what they talked about or what exactly happened. All that we know is how it affected what's to come, and I kind of like that they keep it ambiguous, because, in truth, it's really Gary Hart's word against the press.
Do you feel like you have a traditional marriage?
Yeah, nope, that's it.
You want to know what I'm doing in my spare time, AJ? Is that it? Follow me around. Put a tail on me. You'd be very bored.
That was bullshit.
The reporters from the Miami Herald are tipped off, they stake out Hart's DC townhouse, until they finally catch them together, justifying their decision to tail him by referencing what he previously said to a reporter from the Washington Post. Then, they follow him into an alleyway and confront him about the possible affair.
How long have you known this woman?
What kind of questions are these?
Is she a friend?
I don't know why I would tell you that, Tom. I am not going to...
Can you produce her to corroborate what you're saying here?
I don't have to produce anything. This has gone on long enough.
Senator, we know you...
Where Hart appears flustered and insulted at the reporter's insistence that what they're doing is not only fine, but justified.
You said we must hold ourselves accountable
what I said.
to the highest possible standards of integrity and ethics. Then why are we standing here? Why are we standing in an alley on a Saturday night? I mean, don't you think you owe it to us to be forthcoming?
Oh, you.
You're denying what we've seen with our own eyes.
The only thing I deny is the idea that somehow you have the right to ask me these things.
You're running for president.
I'm aware of that, Tom. It's in the papers.
Well, you have a responsibility.
I know full well what my responsibilities are. Do you know yours?
Senator, you had sex with that woman?
You
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Despite Hart and his team's attempts to quell the story, it still breaks and it sends shockwaves through the election news cycle. Stations all over begin reporting the rumor and using his "follow me" quote to fuel the media fire.
Follow me around.
It was a throwaway line. They're using it after the fact to justify their tabloid bullshit.
Even reputable networks and journalists begin treating the story kind of like a tabloid. His family is also affected by the media scrutiny, raising some questions about the ethics of media coverage and the balance between privacy and transparency in politics. So we see what messages are really at the heart of this film. It explores the importance and impact of character in politics, suggesting that a candidate's personal behavior and whether it affects their ability to govern and lead is truly relevant. As we'll see later, it very much is, but maybe not in the way you think it might be. Polls at the time showed that more people preferred a politician that has good morals and character rather than honesty. The movie shows that Hart's personal behavior and alleged affairs became a liability for him and his team, and how both raised doubts about his judgment and fitness for office in the public eye. Voters' opinions and habits change over time, but this scandal was set apart as a turning point in politics, when personal behavior and character became more impactful for a voter's decisions than someone's policy or record. And none of that would have been possible without the role of the media.
We haven't fact-checked a word of this. You don't even have the woman's name.
All right, look, we could tease the interview, follow it up later in the week.
No, I'm telling you right now, they're gonna find a way to spin this thing. You guys are crazy.
The movie's central message is that the media's intense focus on a candidate's personal life can distract from important policy issues and even undermine the democratic process. Mirroring real life, in the film, the media becomes obsessed with Hart's alleged extramarital affairs, and the story dominates the news cycle, overshadowing his policy positions, platform, and even his position as the frontrunner for the nomination. In fact, part of this is fueled by the fact that he is the frontrunner. It highlights that the media's sensationalism and preoccupation with scandal can harm the democratic process by distracting from the important issues and reducing candidates to their base personal flaws and mistakes. Throughout the film, Gary Hart continues to argue that his personal life is not relevant to his ability to govern, and that the media has no right to pry into his personal affairs.
Economy, we have to talk more about equality of opportunity.
Gary, we can't hide from this.
Who's hiding? I'm working.
We need to say something.
I've already spoken to the person that matters.
There are stories being written right now.
It's gossip, Dix. It'll blow over.
I don't think it's gonna blow over. We need to go through some things.
The point is, it's nobody's goddamn business. None of it is. Right? They shouldn't have been there, period. Now, if we could all just move on.
Some people would disagree, but it does raise an important question. Do candidates for public office, and in this case, the highest elected office in the country, have a right to privacy? The movie shows how the constant news coverage can create a frenzy and how this coverage can shape public opinion. It's always been said that the media has a responsibility to report the news accurately and objectively, not to let their personal biases or interests influence their coverage and provide balanced reporting to their readers. But as we see in the movie, the media's intrusion into the personal lives of politicians can have damaging consequences for them and their families, and is not always based on the most moral objectives. Journalistic integrity is not always a given, and media outlets can have heavily skewed biases against politicians depending on who are the editors, the reporters, and the viewership that they cater to. And when you really boil it down, what exactly was this whole story about?
Hey, why do you hate him so much?
I don't hate Gary Hart. I don't think I trust him.
That's one approach.
Why isn't that your approach? It's your job to be skeptical. I don't think his own wife trusts him.
Oh, you don't know that.
I don't think he respects women.
Are you kidding? He loves women. Too much, frankly.
He uses them.
Look, come on, aren't you being a little precious? I mean, he's smart, he's handsome. These women are throwing
He is a
themselves.
man with power and opportunity. And that takes certain responsibility. If he were just some day trader screwing around with cocktail girls, I could handle just not liking him. But as our potential next president, that makes me nervous. And as a journalist, you ought to care.
For hundreds of years, the realm of politics was seen as strictly masculine. Even the idea that a politician's wife had to stand firmly by her husband, regardless of what he did, is also a product of that history. It's worth noting that Lee Hart stayed married and loyal to her husband even after the debacle of 1987, and they had celebrated their 60th anniversary prior to the movie coming out. Even the mere notion that someone could have something other than a traditional marriage is a testament to how conservative the country was in the 1980s about matrimony. To Hart, it shouldn't have mattered, but he didn't consider, for the sake of his family, for the sake of his wife, for the sake of Donna Rice, that it probably should, especially at the time. The other women in the movie are also belittled, even though they are just as smart and capable as their male counterparts. Donna herself asserts that she never wanted to be seen this way, and regardless of how hard she's worked to avoid it, that's all that regular people will ever see.
You sound very qualified. Well, when you're a model, you know, people just assume that you can't be smart.
Donna Rice did an interview with ABC a few days before the movie came out to speak about the scandal for the first time in 30 years.
At the time when you entered your relationship with him, did you know he was married?
I did not, no. But he hadn't announced, so I didn't know. I was apolitical.
How do you describe the media frenzy in your life?
I couldn't even get back into my apartment. There were high-speed car chases. People on my floor where I was living were renting out their condos for $2,000 a day to mainstream media outlets, helicopters flying around with, you know, zoom-in lenses, and that was my life.
Even to this day, both Donna Rice Hughes and Gary Hart denied that their relationship was ever anything besides friendly. And since 1994, she has been a spokesperson for Enough is Enough, an American secular, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission is to make the internet safer for families and children. And then she later became president and CEO in 2002. Under her leadership, the organization made some pretty impressive strides, and regardless of what her political affiliations or ideology may be now, it really speaks to her character that she never gained any of this success off of the back of Gary Hart.
What did the media get wrong?
Oh my goodness, just about everything. Well, remember, I wasn't saying anything. I wasn't talking. I was silent. And so it's really easy for a false narrative to emerge. They found all these old bathing suit pictures of me, and that fit the image that had been created.
The other woman, the
narrative,
mistress.
The temptress, the bimbo, all this.
And yet, connected to all of these points lies the candidate himself and the main issue of this whole story, Gary Hart.
Do you believe adultery is immoral?
Do I, oh, yes. Yes, I do.
Senator, Senator, have you ever committed adultery?
Well, I guess, I guess I don't think that is a fair question.
Was it ego that led him to do what he did? Was he just naive about what would come from his actions? In the film, Gary Hart is portrayed as a stubborn pragmatist that eschews the warnings of his advisors, foolishly believing that the scandal is preposterous and that no one will, or rather should, care, and that it will eventually blow over. Hart's unwillingness to acknowledge the gravity of the situation ultimately leads him to make stupid mistakes, and his campaign staff, despite their best efforts, can't seem to convince him otherwise. He continuously insists the scandal is something voters don't care about, which betrays his character as well. Is Hart selfishly asserting that people shouldn't care about it to shield himself from scrutiny? Or is he so out of touch that he doesn't know that people care about it? It's possibly a mixture of both. Hart may have had a more progressive or unconventional marriage than most, and there's not anything really particularly wrong with that in my personal opinion. But as a public figure running for public office, Hart needed to take optics into consideration. His greatest folly was not seeing the current climate of the country and pining for something that was more ideal. Had he been able to separate his personal and professional political life he may very well have become the nominee instead of Michael Dukakis, and subsequently become president instead of George H.W. Bush. So in the end, he got what he deserved, right? Reaped what he sowed. But I also understand and agree with what he said in his withdrawal announcement on May 8th, 1987.
I believe I would have been a successful candidate, and I know I could have been a very good president, particularly for these times. But apparently now we'll never know. We're all going to have to seriously question a system for selecting our national leaders that reduces the press of this nation to hunters and presidential candidates to being hunted, that has reporters in bushes, false and inaccurate stories printed, photographers peeking in our windows, swarms of helicopters hovering over our roof, and my very strong wife close to tears because she can't even get in her own house at night without being harassed. And then after all that, ponderous pundits wonder in mock seriousness why some of the best people in this country choose not to run for high office. Politics in this country, take it from me, is on the verge of becoming another form of athletic competition or sporting match. We all better do something to make this system work, or we're all going to be soon rephrasing Jefferson to say, I tremble for my country, when I think we may, in fact, get the kind of leaders we deserve.
Has Gary Hart's prediction come true? Perhaps yes. And especially in the age of the internet, anything and everything about politicians and presidential hopefuls is out there for people to see in an instant. Since this event, Hart has continued to write books and remain active on the sidelines, but never returned to public life. In a 2018 interview with CBS, which was loosely related to the movie, Hart said,
I also said, if we go down the path we've started this week, we will get the kind of leaders we deserve.
Have we?
Yes. You can't have the rules that were applied to me applied to American politics and get people of quality.
Perhaps he's right. If we scrutinize the behaviors and fawn over the celebrity of individuals in power, the only kinds we'll attract are narcissists, megalomaniacs, or something much, much worse. The type of people that can remain duplicitous and unashamed when confronted with evidence of their immorality or wrongdoings. Do we judge them too harshly, these people who supposedly run on policy and principle? Or is it fair to hold them to a higher standard? The message of the frontrunner is ultimately, that's up for you to decide when you cast your ballot. Overall, The Frontrunner is an interesting political drama about a specific point in time, but I don't think the film itself really does the drama that much justice. It feels really bogged down with overlapping characters and messages, and while it does raise some important questions about media, privacy, the importance of character, gender, sexism, I wish that they had focused on at most 3 of those messages. There's so much talent in this cast too, so it really stinks to see a lot of it wasted on throwaway lines and bit characters with very little bite or drama to them. Hugh Jackman does his best to bring Hart to life, and he's easily the most compelling actor on screen, but they tried to be so true to the real Gary Hart that he hardly has any character or insight for the audience at all. We may as well be watching a documentary, and that is kind of intentional on the part of the filmmakers, to get rid of the two-dimensional characters that we boil down politicians, voters, and the media to be. Unfortunately, as far as engaging films go, they didn't really go far enough with making them three-dimensional and understandable enough. Still, it's filmed really well, and everything looks era-accurate, even with touches of Forrest Gump-like effects where the actors are sitting opposite real-life news anchors of the time. I actually had to look it up, and it turns out that they filmed it entirely on technology that was only available in the 1980s. I'll admit though, it took me 2 tries to get through the first hour of this film. Once the story about the alleged affair breaks, it doesn't feel like there's an imploding catastrophe coming. It just kind of feels like a difficult slog towards the inevitable. And perhaps that was intentional, but it just wasn't as compelling as it could have been. I can't fully endorse The Frontrunner, and I give it a 6 out of 10. The real-life story and the real-life man Gary Hart are both far more interesting than this film portrayed them to be.
Character, which got to be the key word, is demonstrated over a lifetime. And I'll put my life up against anybody's in terms of a sound character. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this analysis, please remember to like and share this video, and I'd really like to make more of these in the future, so if you want to see more, make sure to like and share and do all that stuff, but also comment down below and let me know what kind of political movies or TV shows you would like to see me talk about. And of course, subscribing always helps, and I really, really appreciate it. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.